time on compute, right?
Right.
That's what's out there right now is time on compute. How many seconds did you use this? How many hours
I
did you use
think
this?
you need to apply some hot fixes to the legal department and get them back into the current century.
Yeah, we're working on it. We really
sure
are.
You are.
I really am. And I mean, I want to make that clear to everybody out there that, I'm kind of on your side. I want to make this easy. Because to be honest, it makes my job easier because that's a huge ask and a huge pain point for so many people. That's almost the first thing that people talk to me about is, why does your licensing cause me so much consternation?
ColdFusion Alive, the podcast for the ColdFusion community. Discover practices, tools, techniques, tips and trends for modern ColdFusion development. Brought to you by TerraTech, the ColdFusion experts. Develop, secure, optimize. Here is your host, the founder of TerraTech, Michaela Light.
Welcome back to the show. I'm here with Mark Takata, and he's the Adobe ColdFusion Evangelist, and we're going to do an Ask Me Anything episode. So I've been asking questions from listeners. I've got a lot of tough questions. He's agreed to take them. He does have a few boundaries, but, he's very open and transparent guy. So welcome, Mark.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
And for those of you who don't know him, he's been doing full stack application development for more than 20 years. He's been doing it a long time in ColdFusion, but he's also done a bunch of other languages. So he comes with an interesting perspective on, arguments about the role of ColdFusion and how wonderful it is. And he also lives in California and does lots of outdoor stuff and even plays wacky computer games. So
poorly.
Welcome.
I play them poorly, unfortunately. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I guess the first thing maybe some people are wondering is, what the heck is an Adobe ColdFusion technical evangelist?
That's a really good question, and it's maybe not an easy question to answer. And I did want to kind of clarify that in previous iterations of Evangelist that Adobe has had, a technical evangelist is a little bit different than the role, for example, that Alicia Dvorak, who was the previous ColdFusion evangelist, her role really was more centered on the support and sales side of things versus the technical side, which comes from her background. She was in sales, she was in marketing, she was in support. I come from a technical background. I was a dev. I'm in the trenches with all of you. And so when they hired me on, my role really focused more on developer experience, developer relations, the technical side of things, alongside, of course, support, because that gets rolled into it as well. But it helps to have that technical background to know, all right, these are the things that, these are the issues, for example, that a client might have. Maybe it's something I can guide them on myself, or more importantly, I can tell, okay, this is the group that they need to go to actually get a solution. These are the engineers I need to connect them with, or maybe just the support, or in some cases, it's the sales team. Sometimes it's actually a sales issue. They don't recognize it as such, but it is. So so all of those things encompass what I do. I do talks. I'm on social media, and I'm there to listen to the community and engage the community and help the community. I'm not necessarily there to do high-level trainings, but I do conference talks on subjects. I do webinars on subjects which do fall under training in some ways, and I also tell people about other trainings that we have. Right. So some of the things like this year, we're really going to focus on education of the developer community. We're going to be having a lot of trainings out there. And so, if you're not following me on the various social media, please jump on there. Mark Takata, that's where I am, all over Twitter, LinkedIn. I'm going to be sharing opportunities for you to learn. The vast majority will be free. So it's a really great opportunity to go in and take these classes. So that's kind of my role. And it changes from day to day, which is why it's a hard thing to answer. Because some days I'm an ear. I'm like a bartender, right? I'm there to listen to you. And other days I got to roll up my sleeves and fix something. There was a client that came to me that needed a solution for their code, and I actually programmed it for them. I wrote a bit of code. I don't do that very often. It's not really my job, but in this particular case, it was a high enough priority that I just went in and I did it. And now my code is in production with them, which is kind of terrifying, but also awesome. So hopefully
I think if, in normal times, you'd be flying around the United States and maybe other places and visiting key clients.
Yes, very much
user
so.
Groups around the country and conferences that are not ColdFusion and waving the ColdFusion flag and all that kind of thing. And we'll talk more about conferences in a bit. And then also, I have noticed that as well as promoting ColdFusion and related trainings, you also were happy to promote ColdFusion job posts where, if someone's an organization having trouble hiring someone, you'll amplify that.
Yes.
Which, I think really, to be honest, listeners, anything, if it's related to ColdFusion, you can ask Mark, can he help out? He's quite good at saying no. And chances are he might be, either he can help or he can route your request, to the right person there. And I think you work pretty closely with the product manager for ColdFusion too, if people have suggestions for the future versions.
That's a really good point, and definitely to focus on that. I really want to hear from the community what your pain points are. What are the reasons that you might consider, not moving up to the next version of ColdFusion, or what are the things that kind of bother you with using ColdFusion today? And I'm talking everything, from language features to maintenance, to migrations, to, even things like licensing, which I think we're going to chat a little bit about later. All of these.
Oh, yes, definitely going to talk about the L word.
The L word. We want to hear about it. I want to get that information from you, because if we don't have data, so I can tell you right now, the leadership, a few levels above me, they feed on data. They're very metrics-based folks. And so to speak their language, we need that data. We need that information from the community. I want to hear from you. I want to see examples that I can give where people have tried to migrate to the cloud and haven't been able to, for example. That's a great thing, because we're trying to make it easy to get into the cloud. And if it's not, I want to know and I want to fix it. And Aditya is on board 100% as well. He is also a really, really great person to chat with. He's also very available. He's on Slack. He's on the Facebook group. He's on LinkedIn. You can email him as well. And we're both very, I try to make myself very available. I don't want to be the person kind of hidden away and, oh, well, you have to talk to my secretary. No. Nope. Email me. Takata at adobe.com.
You have a secretary?
I wish. No.
You wish.
I know. Actually, I don't wish. I don't want a secretary. I want to handle it myself.
Okay. We're not living in the age of Mad Men anymore, where people had 3-hour martini lunches and had secretaries. And
no.
Good,
I look pretty good in
breaks.
A suit, but
yes. Oh, we have to see a photo of you in a suit. That would be quite entertaining. I think I have photos of me in a suit. So that's entertaining too. So, you worked at UC Davis for a long time, I think. Tell us about doing ColdFusion, of course, and they're an enormous customer of Adobe ColdFusion. I think they have 6 groups who use it. Or
they do. They have a lot of groups that use it. So I actually began my career at UC Davis many, 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 many years ago, and I began my career in ColdFusion at UC Davis. So it's a really good kind of intro into that. They had one of the biggest ColdFusion user groups around there in Davis, and I just remember going my very first time to it and just being totally blown away. I mean, it was a huge room full of people, all of which were. Oops, I just dropped something. Sorry about that. Just everyone was so passionate about ColdFusion, and I was like, "Wow, this is amazing! This community is really great." And of course, moved on from there to other places using ColdFusion and learned other languages. JavaScript, C#, all of these other languages, and kind of filled out my my various capabilities. But eventually that led me to come back to UC Davis. And over the last maybe 5 to 6 years, I've been working with various groups there, sometimes in ColdFusion, sometimes not. But often I would be hired because I had the ColdFusion background, because they would have some ColdFusion that literally nobody knew anything about. Maybe I'm not too proud. I hacked into my share of ColdFusion servers because nobody had any way to get into them. They had long ago lost the passwords for the administrator. And so I had to use a variety of techniques. I know, don't tell anyone, to get in. And of course, I have access to
pretty easy to find articles on the internet. In fact, I think even Charlie has written about this.
Yeah. And if you have access to the file system, it's not that hard to get in and change the password and things like that. But and that led actually to my latest, before I joined Adobe, I had started my own consulting company, and about half of my work was being done with a group at UC Davis, which actually does the student registration system, which is like one of their biggest systems, completely ColdFusion driven. They had issues in the past. We went in there, optimized things, upgraded them to the latest version. The issues all went away. It was a really, really great example of where ColdFusion was being blamed for a lot of things. And when you actually get in there and you take the dust off, it wasn't ColdFusion. It was the way that the code had been set up. It was older code. It was older servers. And really, when it came down to it, it was just the way it was interacting with a database, which often, as they always say, it's almost always the database that ends up being the problem. But they weren't optimizing that interaction in the way that they should have been. And we fixed it. And suddenly they stopped having problems. Like systems would go down when students tried to register because everyone wants their classes, right? They hop in and like, boom, 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 I want this class. And there's a limited number of seats. We made it so that they could do that. And they have a fairly sophisticated system. They're behind F5. It's load balanced, clustered. They're running, I think, 2018, and they're in the midst of a 2021 migration. So they all run on their private cloud internally to UC Davis. So it's a really great place to kind of see what ColdFusion can do in a really major enterprise setting that's used constantly. Right. Because, of course, students don't just register once. There's like 7, I think, different times, because there's like 3 or 4 summer sessions. There's quarters. There's special sessions. I mean, it's wild. So that's one group that does ColdFusion. The registrar also uses it. The chancellor's office also uses ColdFusion. And so, yeah, there's a lot of groups there that I've pretty much worked with all of them. And they're all friends of mine. So they get
cool.
They get all the info.
Yeah, I've met a bunch of the folks from UC Davis at CF Summit in Las Vegas the last time it happened live. So let's talk about ColdFusion conferences, because, gosh, it seems quite a while ago. It was 2019. We last had an in-person Adobe ColdFusion conference. Now, admittedly, last year, Altis had their Into the Box conference in Austin, Texas. It was a hybrid conference, in person and virtual. And then Adobe has been having, I think, 3 events a year. There's been CF Summit Quotes East, CF Summit Quotes West, and then there was CF Dev Week last year, if I remember correctly, plus various random European training events. So tell us about your Adobe's thoughts on conferences for 2022 and forward.
Yeah. So our thoughts on it are ever changing because of the ever changing, reality of COVID. I think we originally had thought we would begin again doing in-person types of things, starting with Adobe Summit East. We were going to do that here in a few months. I think at this point, I haven't really gotten official word on it being canceled, but I can't imagine that it will go forward, considering that COVID numbers are so off the charts. I'm not sure if we're going to convert it to a virtual event. I think probably what we will end up doing, and you'll hear more about this as the year continues, is we're going to do Dev Week again about midsummer, right? And that will be like like last year, fully virtual. And my hope is, and we'll know more about this as spring and summer come around, my hope is that we will be able to do an in-person Vegas summit this year. That is my very, very adamant hope. I think with precautions and masking, I think we could probably pull it off safely. And, unless, who knows what the next variant brings, right? If something else, something else comes out of the woodwork, that dream may go away. But I really, really want to do it because I miss you all, right?
Well, I think it partly depends on the location. It depends, for me, it depends on a few variables. One is what states you decide to do it in, because some states are very, like California, where you are quite restrictive. Other states like Texas or Florida are incredibly open, and I don't think they really have any restrictions at this point. They seem to have these enormous 70-person football games with no consequences. So I can't imagine a 3,000-person ColdFusion event is going to phase them. And
I don't think
and the same with, I'm not suggesting you go run an event in the United Kingdom, but they just dropped all their restrictions this week. I think it was partly a sacrificial device by the Prime Minister to avoid having to resign, but it was also based on the fact that it just wasn't working.
Right. So. Yeah. And I think there's a few things there. I mean, I think we certainly won't have a 3,000 person event just because I don't think people are ready to come out to big events. It will almost be hybrid.
I was pushing you there. I know last time you had 500 or 600. So
yeah,
I've seen 950 person ColdFusion events. I hosted them.
No, and I think our biggest one was something like 800 something people showed up to 2017. Maybe it was. I'm not sure which one.
But the other factor is not just where do you decide to locate it. And Las Vegas is a wonderful location for conferences, as you know, right. For many reasons: flights, hotels, wild excitement outside of the conference. Also, the other factor, I think, is just the corporate culture or the legal department wanting to reduce risk and, fear of being, what happens if someone gets sick or dies because they come to the CF summit? That's going to be terrible publicity. It might be legally, rambunctious or whatever the correct technical term is.
Right.
Yeah. So I could totally get it. And it's a lot easier for a small company like Ortis to push the envelope with these things. And I know they had a waiver you had to sign if you were going to go to say, I'm not going to sue Ortis for getting sick. So
right.
And they had precautions in place. I'm not trying to say they were Wild West or anything, because they weren't. They were very careful.
This podcast is brought to you by TerraTech, the ColdFusion experts. Develop, secure, optimize. Get detailed show notes on today's episode and your free CF Alive Modern ColdFusion Guide at terratech.com. That is TERATECH.com. And now back to today's show.
I think too with Adobe, they want to practice what they preach, as it were. And for us, just as an employee of Adobe, they've been very, very careful. I have not been able to travel even after the restrictions were lowered. It was actually I would have to get a VP's sign off to actually travel in the US, and outside the US, forget it. They just weren't allowing it for safety, for making sure that our employees were staying safe and trying to keep folks from getting sick. And we are continually changing our restrictions in the offices and that kind of thing. Just kind of watching what all the experts are saying and trying to listen to them and trying to balance that against doing business, because we're a business, right? We need to keep moving forward, but we obviously don't want to endanger our folks. So my hope is that a lot of what we're seeing today with COVID out there kind of burns out and lowers down, and it becomes something that you just have to be careful about, but isn't rampaging across the landscape like it is currently.
Maybe we should have a new hot fix for COVID.
Oh, I would love that.
That would address all the issues, and it would just automatically update and be gone. So,
or we can all wear We can all wear
Maybe
deep
that's what-
sea diving suits.
There you go. We could do it. We could do a scuba event, and it will be an underwater in-person event. That would be a first. All right. Anyway, you've given me some ideas for what potential things. And I'll just mention Ortis are thinking about doing Into the Box in Houston, Texas, and I imagine they're going to do the Into the Box LATAM event in El Salvador again. Mm-hmm. Both of those were hybrid, that you could go in person or attend online.
Right.
As we segue into the training concept, I'll just mention, Adobe have a great YouTube channel with a lot of, they have all the videos from CF Summits past on the YouTube channel. So I'll stick the link to that channel in the show notes, but do check it out along with TerraTech's YouTube channel and the Ortis YouTube channel. And there's probably a few other ColdFusion YouTube channels. Let us know in feedback to me or comments on the episode, what other channels you use to see things. And we actually put a channels question in the next State of the Union survey that's coming out soon. So I had a reprieve on the deadline for that, because usually the State of the Union survey is like the end of January or at the latest early February. Apparently this year is March the 1st. So a bit later in the season. But I'm always interested how people learn about ColdFusion, and the Adobe channel is a great way to do that. And then the other channel out there that's really good, that's a paid one, is CF Casts. I don't know if you've seen that, but that's an Ortis training channel that's got a lot of great stuff. It's freemium, right? You can go on for free and see some things, but if you want to see everything, it's like cable TV. You can get the basic channels for the free, and then you can pony up and get all their content. But tell me about ColdFusion training and videos and things. Maybe I've already said it. I don't know.
No. There's more. So I'm going to start with certification, because that's actually going to lead into some of the training info that I wanted to share. So when we first made a certification for ColdFusion a few years back, which I ended up getting, and then after a couple of years, we kind of determined that certification was a little bit flawed. Like we had kind of put it together ourselves. We hadn't gotten external help, and we had gotten feedback that, we were not using, proper certification protocols. Not to say that it's not worth anything. I mean, I'm very proud that I have that certification, but we decided to go back in and refactor it with the help of a professional certification development company. And I was actually hired alongside Nolan and Dave Ferguson and the whole engineering team. And we all got shoved into a hotel in Napa, California for a week and sat there and just, grinded out with a lot of yelling a new certification that was, much more rigorous and much more like covered a lot more info. And then after that, we had videos made. And so what the program did was, at the time, it was, many hundreds of dollars. You would get access to the videos, and then you could at the end of it, you would take the certification test. And if you passed it, you would get an Adobe Certified Professional ColdFusion. So ACPCF certification. I know, like a super long name. So since that point, we've made a lot of changes to it. So first of all, we lowered the price literally to the point where, like, we are just barely paying for what it costs us to have the certification go through the channels that make it official. So, things like getting.
Wait, Mark, what's the new lower price? It's not thousands of dollars. It's not hundreds of dollars. What is it?
Well, it's $149. Which is $149. It used to be like like, I think when I did it, it was $385, like originally, or $4 something. So it's $149, which, I don't know. I feel like that's definitely worth getting the cert, to put on. I think
it was worth getting at $300.
It was
24 hours of video training. I think there was interactive help if you had questions. Is that still true?
Yes. So that you can connect with instructors and things like that. Now, something that
and then you can take. I think you can take the test multiple times, can't you? Or is that no longer true?
Yeah, if you fail it, you can retake it for free, I believe.
To be honest, if you actually spend your time, you spend 24 hours going through those videos. If you get stuck anywhere, you ask questions, it's pretty impossible to fail. I'm sure someone succeeded. And I know people did fail when they took it at CF Summit West a few years ago. But, it's like by failing, you see, here are the areas I'm weak.
Right. And I will say this new cert is more difficult to pass than the old certification.
Oh, it is?
It is. Yeah, significantly more.
Wow.
Yeah, it really delves into more deep language features. Like you really have to know how to be a modern ColdFusion developer to pass this test. So take it.
I love that. Does it give you, do you get feedback? Like, here are 6 areas for modern ColdFusion development, or how many areas there are in Adobe's view. And here, area 1, you're strong, and area 2, you're medium, and this area, you absolutely suck.
We don't have. That's a good suggestion, though. Not the absolutely.
I just suggest some kind of feedback. Like, here are the. I mean, the person wants to be certified or not, but for them personally, not for public consumption, it would be helpful for. Okay, I'm really good in these areas, but these are areas I need to spend more study time on.
For sure. And it's more. It's not necessarily designed as a training, it's more of a cert, but it's kind of being seen as both these days. And so because of that, we are going to be releasing the video portion of it for free. Now we're working on it.
Free videos for training. 20. How many hours of videos?
All of them. All of the training videos.
Used to be 24 hours. How many is it now?
I think it's like 20 something hours. Yeah. I'd have to look again and see, but we need to unravel.
How do we get? How will we be able to get those? They're not free yet, not available yet.
They're not available yet. The way that you will get access to it is you'll go to the Adobe website, you'll go to the certification program, and you will sign up. So we'll take your info, and you'll begin the program without paying. So you'll begin the training program to get to the certification. You'll have access to all the videos in perpetuity. You can do whatever you want with them, take as long as you need. At the end of the training sessions, when you get to the very end, you will then be given the option to pay to take the test if you wish to. If you don't, if you just want to do the training part of it, totally awesome. Yeah. We're super glad to have people go through it and get better at being ColdFusion developers. That's my goal. And if you want that cert, if you want that shiny badge, then you can pay to do it. So
you can. Excellent. What a great idea to do that. I'm just going to throw a few other ideas out, and we can chat about them offline in more detail. But that idea that learning what areas you're strong in, where are you weak, and the other related idea is a kind of gamification of the training. Where you kind of, as you're learning, it kind of evaluates how you do, so you can see how you're progressing. I mean, that almost, I'm not suggesting you go crazy here, because some people do a kind of machine learning AI evaluation of students, and maybe UC Davis can tell you what they're up to in that department. But just something to make it more fun. And so they can, you're getting through like levels in a game. You're a gamester, so you know what I'm talking about here.
I am, and I will say too, that we do have a learning management system in my business unit. So Captivate and Captivate Prime.
Well,
there's
a marriage made in heaven there, possibly.
There is, and we are actually constantly trying to work together and collaborate. So that's actually a really good idea, is to try and leverage some of the new, and we just came out with a new version of Captivate, which has more features. It was totally rewritten. It's in a new format, which is more extensible. So that's actually a good idea, is to extend that into maybe some gamification. And gamification is a really big topic because it makes it more fun to learn. It gives you feedback, right? So that's been a topic.
Well, you get all-time high score as well to show off to your ColdFusion developer friends.
That's true. That's true.
And then the other crazy idea that came to me, and I have no idea if this is technically possible or even feasible, but couldn't you have a tool that looks at your code and does a similar thing and says, well, you're really good at using these kind of features in ColdFusion, but do you realize you're missing out on these other features that could have helped you? And and you write really crappy, insecure code, and
well, that part exists. That part exists.
I know that part exists. That the security audit tool exists, the migration tool exists, and they tell you various things. But it would be, I have no idea if this is technically possible or even if Adobe would want to do it, but it would be really nice to have a thing that you would analyze your code and say, here are your strengths, here are your weaknesses, both in the ColdFusion language term, areas. And, are you writing modern ColdFusion code? And possibly in terms of architectural stuff. But anyway, I'll stop blabbering.
I don't know if have you used GitHub Online has an IDE essentially that does kind of what you're talking about. Like as you're writing your code, it will make AIML based suggestions. So if you're writing a class, for example, and you begin to write stuff, it will actually say, oh, I think you're trying to do this. And it'll make a suggestion that you can just say, yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. And then it will fill out, 90% of what you need. And then you fill in the details. Now they don't have that for ColdFusion yet, just because it's not one of the, juggernauts of the industry necessarily, JavaScript is. But that's something to maybe consider, is having, I'm wondering if there's a language engine that we could help develop to make that a possibility. It would certainly help developers who use that, right? To do that.
I'm having a dream here. I have a dream that sometime in the future you're coding away in whatever you call the Adobe extension to VS Code for ColdFusion. You probably have some snazzy code name out there.
Oh gosh, no, I wish. We keep calling it Builder, and and it's I don't know. I think we're just going to end up calling it Builder, even though it's not the old Builder.
But anyway, it would be it would be an AI coding assistant. It would be, it could give you tips, be like doing pair programming, but with a machine learning. You could turn it on off. It was getting irritating. And it would, suggest refactorings or suggest, hey, you should be using this newer feature of ColdFusion or whatever.
I like that idea.
Anyway, that's not for this year, guys listening. That's a future Star Trek edition of CF Live.
2023 for sure, though, but not this year.
There you go. Yes, it's on the roadmap. Let's talk about training videos. ColdFusion training. What you wanted to say something about that, I think, before we go to the L word.
No, we covered that. So that was that.
We've covered it. Okay.
Yeah, the videos were the ones that were related to the certification. And I will say though, there are of course webinars are available on coldfusion.adobe.com. I'm not sure if you had covered that before. Webinars are there. Old videos from summits and dev weeks are also up there. So if people have missed a variety of things from previous events, we've been running events for a long time. A lot of those videos are up there from, the past few years, and we'll continue to get
classic presentations.
Yes. Classics.
Probably your one is up there from a few years ago.
It is. Several of mine are up there from multiple online events. Now, unfortunately, the first talk that I ever did is not up there because we weren't recording at the time. And this one of my best talks, which is my classic single page applications with JavaScript and ColdFusion. I did this talk in 2018, I think it was. And I had a full room. It actually scared the bejesus out of me. I walked in and I went, oh, they put me in a huge room. I was not expecting that, because the previous times I had 40 people. So they put me in this room with hundreds of people, and it was great. It was super fun. I had built a game the night before while drunk out of my mind, and we got to refactor it in time, and they were recording it, quote. And then when it came time to put it up there, they said someone had unplugged the camera.
Oh no!
They had been unplugging their laptops and stuff, and they just unplugged.
Yes.
So
yes, that can happen.
Unfortunately, the only stuff that exists of me is stuff that I've recorded in the virtual conferences.
Worry not. In wherever the CF Summit West occurs,
I'll be back.
You'll be back. Yeah, exactly. And I added into the show notes. I wrote a blog post, a comprehensive list of training resources on ColdFusion. We'll double check all the ones you mentioned are in there. If not, we'll add them in. We're always updating it. Great resource for finding that. I know we've already got most of the ones you talked about there. So let's turn to licensing, because when I'm out talking to ColdFusion developers and CIOs, that's often an issue they're having or a confusion. And I know some of the licensing terms changed with ColdFusion 2021. And we can talk in general about that, but maybe we should start with the thing that I think one of the things that causes consternation, which is using ColdFusion in the cloud.
Yeah.
People expect to just be able to run ColdFusion in a Docker instance, load it up on any cloud vendor they feel like, and have some way to pay you guys, for having a production server in the cloud. And right now, the only way you can do that is on AWS through their marketplace, which is great. And you've had, how many downloads have you had there? Is 300,000 or something?
375,000 is the last number that I saw when I went and checked the other day.
That shows how many people are using ColdFusion. And, we know other languages have more users. Like Node, I think you had 1.5 million AWS downloads, but it's in the same ballpark, guys,
It's a lot. It's a lot. And no one was more like, we thought we would get 70,000, to be honest. And we would have been super excited if it was like 70 or 100,000. When we saw those numbers growing the way they were, we were kind of like, we literally went to AWS and said, is this a mistake? Like, really? We have this many people interested in downloading ColdFusion as a Docker? And they said, yeah, it's not even like they checked. It's not bots. It's people out there who are.
Well, they have to pay for it, right?
Well,
they're paying by the hour or whatever the model is with AWS.
So no, let me clarify what that thing is.
What does that number mean?
So that number is people who go into Docker and at the command line put in that they want to pull down the Docker image that we have that gets loaded into Docker wherever the heck that they want to put it. So they can be putting it on AWS, Google, locally, local cloud, like whatever, because you can run Docker like literally anywhere, right? So that's what that is. Now, we do also have a licensing agreement with Coalesce Solutions on AWS, which is like one of the easiest ways to use CF. You just go in there and you say, I want to use this, and you click a button, and then like you enter in a couple things, and now you're using ColdFusion in the cloud, and it's running. It's limited though, and I'll be the first to say it's limited because it's you have to use a particular level of machine to actually make it responsive, because it's an enterprise install, right? So unless you really know what you're doing, you have to have the whole thing running, which takes RAM. And one of the things that we did improve since I joined, which was an ask that I had, and they actually ended up doing this, was you now have the ability to use it for free for 30 days on a free machine from AWS. So that's a big deal, I think, to try out the product. You used to have to pay for the machine, but you'd get 30 days free on the actual license in the cloud with AWS. So that's a nice thing. And it wasn't a lot, right? I mean, it was like, I forget, it was like a 4-core, 6 gig RAM machine. I don't know. I think the first time I did it, it was like $5, right? Because I was just playing with that. I was, it's not something, if you're trying it out intrinsically, that's not putting it into production, right? But again, this is one solution that we have. It's through a partner, right? And we get people all the time that are saying, well, we want to take CF and put it into a VM. We want to run an EC2 instance and run it in a VM. We want to spin something up in Azure and have maybe multiple VMs and mesh them and do all that. Like, how do we license that? How do we get it running? And this is the place where I'm kind of with you guys. I think the licensing terms are so complicated and so difficult to understand that it hurts everyone. It hurts us because we make less sales. It hurts the community because I have people come to me all the time not because they don't want to pay for ColdFusion or whatever that, but literally saying, I just want to make sure I'm doing this right. They don't want to get a call from our lawyers, right? That's not a great place to be.
Maybe we need to gamify the licensing, so they play a licensing game and they either. I'm only semi-unserious. I mean, it'd be pretty easy
you're right.
to go through a little quiz and you kind of answers, here's what you need.
And you are more right than probably you even imagine. We have a worksheet that our sales and engineering team uses to determine what type of license is correct.
Could you share that worksheet? Or could you sanitize it so it could be shared?
I think
got a flow chart on it we could follow. I mean,
that's what I'm saying. I think we could take that potentially and maybe make it something that's easier for people to put in their information and then and bring something out of it. We would just need to make sure that, like legal was okay with it, that the sales team was okay with it. Because part of what they want to do, and I totally understand, is they want to have the touch, right? They want to have the human touch. They want to talk to someone. Because if you come to me and you say,
just do it like you talked about with certification, and you have a quotes free level, right? Where you go in, you plug in your stuff. It says, this is what we think you need. And then here's how you have a call with the sales team or buy it on the website or whatever.
Right. Yeah. And you're
on the level, right? If the number of licenses is less than a certain amount, I'm sure the sales team just want you to go to the website and buy one license of ColdFusion Standard. But if you've got, a complicated situation and it's multiple licenses, then then I'm sure they'd be delighted to assist.
Yeah, so. And I think we're also behind in a very important part, which is something I'm passionate about. That's documentation, right? So I was an English major in college, and so for me to not have detailed documentation about, not just licensing, everything, right? And we have a documentation channel on Slack. Literally because I said, please, can we have something like this? Because I want to get our docs better. But if we could improve, like I'll give you an example of something that happened just the other day. Is someone was looking for blue-green testing information about licensing in Docker on a blue-green type of situation. There really wasn't information available, even to me. Like I was confused.
Remind listeners what blue-green might even mean.
So blue-green is first in, first out. So if you have, let's say you've got one instance that's running here and there's a failover that needs to happen for whatever reason, whether it's because this one is going down, the machine needs to change, you've done a node downtime migration to a new version, whatever that happens to be. Technically, there are two servers running, which you would think, you would need two licenses for it. But really what's happening is this one here, the blue, is dying, right? No more new people are coming to this one. Everything is getting routed to the new one until there's nothing here. And then the Docker instance goes away, right? So really, what does that mean? What does production actually look like from a licensing standpoint? Is it one or is it two? Right? That was the question. And I didn't have a good answer. And so we were going back and forth on that. And I think, and hopefully I don't get fired for saying this, I think the answer ended up being, after a lot of discussion, that really the most important thing is the final production place, which is the green, which is one license. If this one over here is actively dying and going away and not hosting new ones, then the endpoint is the most important thing, which would require one.
I could simplify your licensing right now. Pay us money, be fair, and make it simple. KISS or whatever the principle is, right? Keep it simple,
right?
Whatever the S stands for.
And there's a lot of stuff out there too that we're our licensing model is kind of old. We're still
it's based on physical hardware, not virtual private servers, not cloud instances, not containers, not Lambda instantation for microseconds.
Yeah. Time on compute, right? That's what's out there right now is time on compute. How many seconds did you use this? How many hours?
I think you need to apply some hot fixes to the legal department and get them back into the current century.
Yeah, we're working on it. We
Yeah,
really
I'm sure
are.
you are.
I really am. And I mean, I want to make that clear to everybody out there that, I'm kind of on your side. I want to make this easy. Because to be honest, it makes my job easier because that's a huge ask and a huge pain point for so many people. That's almost the first thing that people talk to me about is, why does your licensing cause me so much consternation?
I think the issue is it's legacy licensing. The legal language, it's legal legacy licensing language, and it needs refactoring.
It is, and
seriously.
And things are moving. Part of it is, of course, legal departments move very slowly, right? And the internet does not, right? Like I'll give you a good example. This is a funny story. So I was talking with somebody. I was talking with one of the content folks, Brian Class. I was chatting with Brian Class and Aditya and a few folks from Adobe, and he kind of offhandedly said something like, "Oh, there's 14 different ways to host Docker in AWS," right? And I laughed because I thought he was totally out of his mind. There can't be 14 different ways. And I went on there, and he was right. There were 14 different ways. I counted them. So then maybe 3 weeks later, I'm talking with an AWS person from Australia. You may know him, Paul. And we're chatting, and he said, there's like 17 different ways. And I said, Paul, there's 14, right? And he said, no, there's 17 now. We have 3 new ones that they came out with the last week. I said, are you kidding me? Really? He said, oh, yeah. Yeah. And he named them off. There were these 3 new ways to host. Like, one of them was Lightsail now supported Docker instances, right? And they had another. And so the speed with which the environment in the cloud moves is very difficult to keep up with. I'm not making excuses. This is kind of the reality, is like, we are constantly tailing the just chaotic, put the iron to it. Like, we gotta catch up, because it's not going to slow down. By any means, right? It is going to keep going at the speed that it's going, and maybe even speed up more. So
it's speeding up more. Generally, technology is speeding up more. So it is a challenge. And I remember reading a sci-fi novel where, this was set, I forget how many years in the future this was set, but the guy, they have what they call entrepreneurship 2.0, and he had legal machine learning bots that would come in and change the terms of service dynamically on the fly.
Oh, wow.
When stuff changed in the real world. So, because they could do it quicker than a human legal team, they were more successful. And I'm not saying you should do that, but one thing I definitely think, and whether you want the vision I put out there of fair, simple, and pay us, or you have some other vision, I think for any successful project I've ever worked on, whether it's computer or human or whatever, there needs to be a clear vision. If you don't have a clear vision, you won't get to where you're going. And I think the licensing, almost certainly, there is no clear vision about what do we want our licensing to be for Adobe, for our customers, for the legal department. How will we know if we succeeded? Because if you don't have a clear vision, you're never going to know if you get a good endpoint.
Yeah, and
in addition,
really important.
When great people like you have, been promoted up to, super evangelist or whatever,
I'm going to suggest that to my manager.
Super evangelist is like Superman. You'd go into a phone closet and you change, and then you'd be able to solve 3 times as many problems. But the point is, if you just have people who are really heart-filled and clever and passionate about this, but then they move on to another role, then the thing starts to degrade. It's like software, right? If you've got a great developer on a project and they're looking after it because it's their baby, and then they, get promoted onto another project and there's no vision for the project tends to get extra clunky features, or it starts to degrade and get technical debt. And, that's my experience.
Code rot.
Yeah, you get code rot. If you don't have a clear vision, where you're trying to have the thing be, or you get what Microsoft have with Microsoft Office, right? It's got 17 zillion features, of which I use 17 or 14 or whatever the correct number is.
Yeah.
Whereas Google Docs seems to do a better job of this. They're always refactoring it and moving the menus around and, making it easier based on the fact that they get millions of data points on, well, what do people really use in Google Docs day to day and where do they seem to have trouble? So
yeah, and that is actually, by the way, that's a really good point. Is we are working actively to try and understand the way that people are using ColdFusion a lot better than we have in the past.
Cool.
That's been a really important thing for us.
Well, I don't want to get all sneaky and 3-letter agency spy on us while we do it, but maybe there needs to be a checkbox option. Do you want Adobe to study what you're doing with your code to, give feedback on what you're doing, whatever. I don't know. I didn't phrase that very well, but you get the idea.
I do. And I think a lot of what we're looking at is maybe less intrusive than that, but just things like how many times are people downloading and installing some of the packages that we have in Package Manager, right? Like
now, I mean, that's something not a lot of people know about, to be honest. So let's just dig into that for a moment. It used to be when you install ColdFusion, you needed to put away quite a lot of time on your cloud server or whatever, because it's a 1 gigabyte download and it has everything in the kitchen sink in there. But now with the Package Manager, it just has, I forget how small is the install now? I forget.
135 megs.
It's only 130, down from 1 gig to 135 megs.
Yeah,
so
1.2
times smaller.
Yeah.
And I know Lucy, to mention a different L word, Lucy hasn't even the smaller install image, I believe. I forget how big theirs is, but anyway, they spent a lot of time optimizing for that. And obviously you guys said, yeah, anything you can do, we can do better, or whatever you did say. You probably were inspired. I think it's friendly cooperation or whatever. But the point is this Package Manager, you can tell it to only bring in features when you need them. And if you don't use the PDF features of ColdFusion, you don't need all that code. And ditto with all the other stuff.
Well, I think the really important thing about the Package Manager that I and you're right, a lot of people don't know about this, which is really important that we continue to get information out about this, because it's a really awesome feature. Like when you download ColdFusion and you drop the 1.2 gigs or whatever onto there, you get you get connectors for Oracle, you get connectors for SQL Server, you get connectors for Maria, you get right? Who in their right mind would use all of those things? Nobody, right? Nobody uses 9 different databases in their code. No one is using SOAP and RESTful and this, and like you use a subset. That's how you use it, right? So you should only need to pull down the packages that you need for your particular use case. And that's the way kind of the computing world has worked for a long time, right? I mean, Node, NPM, right? That's how you do it. You pull in the packages that you need and you install them. You require them. And in C#, same thing, right? You have NuGet. You go into NuGet and you pull down just the packages and the classes and all that you need for your particular thing. You're connected to Oracle.
And there's a tool built into ColdFusion 2021 to scan your code to say, here's what we think you're using.
Yes.
You can add in some more if you have some dynamic stuff going on, but
yeah, and that we can do better. That's one thing actually that I've given my feedback to the team, and they are looking at making that better, because currently you have to do that at the in the CLI, in the command line interface. There is no GUI for it. I'm asking them to try and improve that so that it's available and more exposed and visible to a wider range of ColdFusion users, because not a lot of people honestly drop into the CLI as CF users. They just don't. You have to use the CLI if you're a JavaScript developer these days.
So yeah. So anyway, let's. I did want to inject one other thing on licensing. I highly suggest, if you haven't already, you or the engineering team look at what Integral did with Fusion Reactor for licensing, because they have a similar challenge. They have a paid, they have a product that looks at performance on ColdFusion, and they let people use it in the cloud. And you can either use it on premises or you can have their cloud version. And they had a great challenge with that because, well, first of all, they had to come up with a pricing model. But on the technology side, they've got to count the as, they've got to have your, whatever. How much is good is your credit card? Are you going wacko crazy on how many as of use you're using? Right. And I guess in your case, because you've got, and I don't know if they do this, but if you have enterprise clients, they sometimes like to be bill us every month kind of thing. And your sales team at that point probably has to evaluate, are they a good credit risk? I don't know how that works. But the other point I was going to make is they sell to some government agencies that use their stuff and it's not even connected to the internet. So they had to come up with a way, how do we meter stuff when it's not even regularly on the internet? And I think they sell bunches of ads and you plop it onto your hidden secret server at your 3-letter agency, and then it counts down the clicks until you've used them all up, and then you have to reload it. Or I think that's how it works. But my point is, why don't you talk to them, or even, I'm sure you could just talk to David Tattersall, the CEO there, and say, look, David, you're a great guy. Couldn't you just sell us this technology to license to use? And we'll give you
That's a good suggestion.
Yeah. Or at least, look at what they did. So the other thing, so there's technology problems. I know when I talked to Ashish about this a couple of years ago, that was one of his concerns, that there are technology issues with licensing.
Right.
And then, as you said, there's legal issues. So the other two licensing things I'll just briefly mention, because I notice the clock is running down on our time slot. Is CPUs. Now you have to pay. The more CPUs they have, you have to pay. And many years ago, having more than 1 or 2 CPUs on a server was like a miracle. But now servers can have a gazillion CPUs, well, at least 16, and that's not unusual. And yeah, I think the licensing wants you to pay quite a lot more when you have more than a certain number of CPUs.
Yeah. Now we're in an area that
or whatever the. Yeah.
Cores. I think it's cores.
But modern chips have a zillion. Have how many cores just come on one chip these days?
Mine has 12.
12, right?
Mine has 12. I think I saw I'm shopping for a new system, which is like, so expensive now. But I think that one had 16. So this is
standard now, is my point. But when that licensing was written, you wouldn't expect to have that many cores on someone's laptop.
Right. Yeah. Like back then, having 4 cores was like a big deal. Yeah. Now this is totally outside of my like wheelhouse. I don't understand enough about this to probably speak intelligently about how this works. I do know you can assign cores to processes. So, and so now
you can rack it down. But my point is, you shouldn't have to do that. There should be some fairer way in terms of CPU horsepower per minute, or something. I don't know. Or why are we even worrying about it?
You got me. This is an area where I'm just
I know why they did it. They wanted to segment between one man and her dog development agencies and big enterprise people, and make the big enterprise people pay more because they've got more money. That's I'm being a little blunt here, but that's basically why they do this. They figure, these people have more horsepower on the server. They've got more users. They should pay more. That's sort of the thinking, I think. And one indirect way to measure how much money an organization has is how many cores do they put on the server. Well, that was true in 2010 or whatever year this was done.
Right. But now you can't find one without. Yeah, you can't find machines with less cores.
So I mean, it's up to you guys what you do, but my personal suggestion is probably just get rid of that core clause or whatever you call it, because the core of that apple has gone rotten.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the cloud, it might make more sense because you don't buy a machine on the cloud.
No, on the cloud, you're getting. I mean, you can follow whatever AWS does, right?
Mm-hmm.
However they charge their metering,
right?
But they're not trying to lock you in. It's like, you've got to pay an extra whatever because you bought the machine. There you're paying by the hour, and you can ramp those things up and down. So.
Right. Or even auto scale them. Yeah. So no, I mean, it's this kind of falls back into the whole, like, we're trailing technology. Right. And things aren't necessarily clear. Like, if you were to just assign 2 cores to a machine, would that make the license? I don't know that. I actually don't know the answer to that.
Well, here's the other issue that's related. Okay, if you're in the cloud and you've got several Docker containers running, you're presumably paying for each of them, assuming they're all production and not development containers. In the future vision, I'm not talking about now. I'm just talking about future vision. Okay,
yeah.
What would be fair is, hey, I'm running 10 Docker containers on this app because the Super Bowl ad just ran and we've got a lot of people hitting our site, and it's fair that I'm paying more for ColdFusion for the time I've got 10 containers up, right? But here's a related question. Okay, how many cores do I stick on each virtual machine in the cloud, right? Because I could either have 10 containers with only 2 cores, or I could have 5 containers where you'll have 4, or whatever the math is to make it work. So there is something with core, but I don't know what the answer is. But
I can make it even more complicated.
You can?
Okay. I can. Unfortunately, yeah. This makes it. This is almost a nastier problem, and it's a Docker specific problem. Is you can auto scale and add. You can do Docker swarms. So if you're getting hit, and you can say, okay, I'm at 75% CPU capacity on it, spawn a new Docker and put it into the cluster, and they call it swarms, right? Well, that new one has to have something assigned to it. Right.
Well, that's why I'm saying it needs to move to a metered thing. You pay per hour or per minute or whatever the time unit is for use of having a container. I mean, that to me is the fair way to do it. You shouldn't have to upfront decide, I may have up to 15 containers, so I'm going to pay 15 licenses. That's ridiculous. Right. Because most of the time, on average, I've got 3 licenses.
Well, right. And it changes constantly, right? Like what's my load? My load changes throughout the year. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously AWS does that, and so does Azure for their actual
So
compute.
just do something similar to what they do, where they meter it, if it's possible to do that.
If it's possible, I wouldn't.
Anyway, let me just bring up the one other thing I've heard people get upset about or confused, or and which is if you have a SaaS product you wrote in ColdFusion, I think there's a new license clause that turned up in 2018. Because CF 2018,
right,
saying you have to pay more because you wrote a SaaS, whereas if you have a regular website or an intranet or something, you don't. And I think the reasoning there was, well, if you have a SaaS, you have the ability to make trillions of dollars because you've got all these users pounding into your site, and we want some of that money, some of that action. I think that was the thinking. I don't know. I'm making this up. My crazy imagination.
Right.
And I've had people be very confused. Are we a SaaS? Should we be paying this? And then they go to talk to Adobe sales and like, well, you're not really a SaaS, or you're too small. We're not worried about you. Don't worry about it. It just causes a lot of confusion.
Yeah.
And to be honest, in my view, it isn't even fair. Adobe shouldn't be concerned about what people write in their software. They create a ColdFusion programming language. It's over the wall, over the Chinese wall. You developers do whatever you want to create. Whatever you want in this software, it's not our concern or our responsibility. That's my personal.
I mean, I for the most part agree. I think there are places that you do have to be a little worried, like hosting, right? Like I think there is something to be said about people who host the stuff, and we have a hosting agreement, and our hosts are happy with it. Like we have a lot of very happy hosts that use it. They've got a different issue, right? That they don't, they charge by the month typically, right? And they can't guarantee, how many months will this client stay for, right? Right.
And they need to be able to ramp it up and ramp it down easily. It's kind of analogous to the cloud situation with containers, except horizontal instead of vertical. Or
right. And it's a different. What am I trying to say? Like the economics of it are different for their users. Like they come on, they leave. I actually had my business ran on HostTech, who is a partner of Adobe's, and they're great. I love them. And I was actually a ColdFusion reseller through them. So I would host ColdFusion sites through HostTech and resell them and all that. So, they make it work, and they seem to be happy with their stuff. The SaaS
they're a great host.
I like them. The SaaS thing, it happened before my tenure at Adobe, and I remember I was actually at summit when this thing came up. There was a lot of people yelling about it. And then it kind of went away for the most part. And I am not really sure whether there was someone that was misinterpreting something in the licensing and went after people and then got people mad. And I don't know if people went, whoa, whoa, wait, and tried to quiet people down. But I do know actually HostTech reached out to me and said, if anyone from Adobe ever contacts you about SaaS type things, let us know. We will work it out. We have everything worked out, which was really cool of them. Yeah. And,
do you know who listeners might reach out to a HostTech? Should they just go to the chat and ask anyone, or?
Yeah. You can go ahead and just reach out to their
sales team.
Go through their sales team. So if you go to HostTech, they have a chat window, and you can choose either technical sales or something else.
Billing.
Yes, thank you. And then you can just say sales, and someone will chat with you about that information. Now, since that happened, that was 2018. That was 3-4 years ago. That was a while back. I haven't really heard too much about that coming up. And I have some friends who run what could ostensibly called SaaS platforms in CF. And they haven't really run into many problems with it. I tend to agree. Like we really, being in the business of what people do with your software, unless it's something nefarious, right? Which we don't want to enable people to do nefarious things.
I don't think that's anything of that. That isn't the language manufacturer's problem, and your license should make it very clear that what you write with your code is none of their responsibility. And you shouldn't try and police it, because if you open that Pandora's box, you've opened an enormous legal liability that you're supposed to be policing what kind of code people write. And it's not a good idea.
That's a good point. But,
gosh. I mean, I know you don't want people to write naughty things with it, but people are going to write whatever. Programmers do what programmers do. And some of them are going to write things that are not so pretty. So anyway, we've got 7 minutes left. Let me just mention. Someone asked me to ask you about ColdFusion Report Builder, which I forget what version of ColdFusion that was in. It must be at least 10 years ago.
2016.
But I know there was 2016 was the last version that was in.
We did anything with it.
Yeah. So is there any way that code could be released, under open source or something, so that the folks who use ColdFusion Report Builder could do cool things with it?
I don't know about that. I know that we're hearing a lot of people bringing this up, and I think it's more people were using it than we really were aware of, and it's pretty important to a lot of people who've just kind of kept quiet about it, or they haven't had the channels to reach out. And now that we've opened the doors to that, we're beginning to hear people who either have used it in the past and have reports that they now can't change, but they still use them, or they still actively try and use the 2016 product, which in many ways is not capable of doing things. We've changed the language so much since 2016 that now they'd like to be able to use some of the new features, but they can't in it. So I think what we're looking at is, what do we do?
So that's something you're... Oh.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's something you guys are looking into, what you could do to resurrect it.
Yeah, or resurrect it, or find an integration with it, because report building is extremely important. Clearly, right? Businesses build reports. They build dashboards and reports, right? That's huge. And for a long time, we were just kind of expecting people were building their own reports. I did that. I would just use whatever, charts.js and D3, and I would build my own front end to something that would pull data and display it. But it's become more and more clear that people kind of want a framework for that to happen in that's first party. And I think that's really the important distinction here. Either a first party or a very tight second party integration with some other tool, right? So it's definitely on the whiteboard, and it's being looked at. We are actively trying to get feedback. By the way, if you are a listener here and you use Report Builder and you have opinions on it, please let me know. Like, I want to hear the community telling me about what they're using it for, what they'd like to see from that, that kind of thing. It's very important for us, because it kind of came out of nowhere. Like, we didn't expect this level of passion, and so it surprised us a little bit.
Yeah, maybe that feature usage tool, you're going to measure what bits of ColdFusion people use would help you in the future in this regard.
Sure.
And I know one of the other initiatives that has happened in the past is you've asked people to volunteer a private copy of their code base so you can use it for testing and to optimize the code. And I don't know if there's a way to extend that out to kind of scan what features people have used in their code on a voluntary basis. So
that's a good idea also. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that's going to have to be the final meaty topic. I know we had an idea of automatic cloud coding with automatic scaling, and you just drop your code onto the cloud and it would run and scale automatically. But I don't think we have time. That sounds a deep topic to discuss. Yeah. And I know someone was also asking about a development version of the API manager. And then someone else is asking, when is the VS Code for ColdFusion add-on from Adobe coming out?
Soon, trademark.
Maybe you can just answer that. Soon.
Soon, trademark. So
early
Q2 is now our target. It was going to be late Q1, and we've just been hit from so many angles by the Log4j thing.
Sure.
kind of delayed things. COVID obviously has been just generally speaking a friction point across all industries, and all companies are just doing things more slowly. So it's coming. And to be clear, and I don't know how much people know about the product. This isn't a code coloring / tag completion tool. It does that, but it's going to have most, if not all, of the features from the Builder Eclipse tool, which is a lot. There's a language engine, there's suggestions, there's going to be tie-ins to the security scanner. All of these things are going to be in this product. It's going to be awesome. We might need a little bit of refactoring at the beginning, because full disclosure is the first time we've ever built a VS Code plugin. So, hopefully we get it mostly right. But we're dedicated to making this the best IDE for ColdFusion, period. Drop mic. Like, that's what we want this to be.
Well, I can tell we need a separate episode just to talk about that when there are more concrete details, either with you or someone else on the engineering team, or both. So appreciate you coming on the show, Mark. If people want to reach you online, what are the best ways to do that?
Sure. Yeah. So the easiest way is just to email me, takata@adobe.com. That's the easiest way. That goes right to me. I'm also on Slack at Mark Takata. I'm on the CFML Slack if you're part of that group. I'm on LinkedIn, of course. If you just search for Mark Takata and pick the one that works at Adobe, that's me. You can add me as a contact there and DM me if you'd like. I'm also part of the CFML programmers group on Facebook as well. So kind of everywhere. I'm eternally online. I'm on Twitter as Mark Takata. You can contact me there as well. So I'm all over. The email's probably the best, because I try and really focus on getting that. Some of the social stuff, I don't necessarily, when my phone pings with a Twitter thing at 2 a.m, I don't necessarily answer that right away. But if my email hits, then that's a little more important, because I know that's going to be not necessarily something new in Destiny that someone wanted to tell me about, but is more important and work related. So,
well, great. Well, thanks for explaining your evangelist role, and thanks for going out into the world and evangelizing ColdFusion. It's really great to see all the cool things you do.
Thank you. It's been an honor. Thank you so much for having me on. I've had a great time. And I'm looking forward to hearing feedback from everyone and meeting even more ColdFusion users out there.
Get detailed show notes on today's episode in your free CF Alive Modern ColdFusion Guide at teratech.com. That is teratech.com. Viva la CF Alive Revolution!